Hello, Prestige heads, and welcome to American Prestige Q&A session. I think this is number 4 or number 5, one of the two. I'm here, as always, with my friend and comrade, Derek Davison, and I am, of course, Danny Bessner, and we're going to answer one of your questions. So for those who don't remember, you have to sign up for our Discord to ask us questions that we will answer. So, Derek, this week, the question is asked by OneAngryVegan. And here it is. I'll read it in full. So, there doesn't seem to be any real socialist horizon anywhere in the imperial core, at least in the classic Marxist sense of a workers' revolution. That being said, in the global south, there seem to be largely popular and dynamic leftist movements, such as the Landless workers' movement in Brazil or India's farmers' movement, notably both about land reform. There are also other conceptions of the end of capitalism. The communizers have a notion of an instant transition to communism in the liminal spaces abandoned by capital, and one could conceive of some sort of climate Possadism. We should have a thing, always drink whenever Possadism comes up. Do either of you find any hope in non-Orthodox schools of thought or movements in the rest of the world? So, Derek, I'm gonna point this one to you to start because you're much more expert in other regions of the world. So I'm curious what you think about the notion that basically the imperial core had its chance at leftist revolution, what me and my buddy Matt Chrisman used to talk about when it came to World War I. that was the
right.
ended it all, and that we have to start looking outside this imperial core in order to basically find hope in something transcending capitalism. So what do you think about that? And are there any examples that you could point to?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I don't have a good. I'm not optimistic. Let's say without some sort of intervening. Uh, I mean, I don't want to say disaster, but some kind of upheaval that takes apart the system, the global system that's built up now, which is all capitalist. It's all the major powers, all the institutions, they're all set up to push, to foist a kind of exploitative capitalism on the global south. And there's very little that these movements can do, even to get power in their own countries because of the way the systems are set up. But beyond that, to challenge the structures of global capital, you're looking at countries, the sort of emerging states of Africa, and I mean, let's even just focus on the level of kind of the middle power or the emerging middle power. So countries like Nigeria or Ethiopia, places like Latin America. You could talk about Brazil. You could talk about maybe Colombia at some point. I'm not sure if you can say that now. Mexico. Yeah, there are definitely different ideas about how to manage societal rot and decay. I think Mexico's a great place to look. I mean, Claudia
I was going to
Sheinbaum
ask,
is
what do you
doing
think, Shane Baum? What do you think of that?
a very good job so far. But she's when I say she's doing a very good job, she's doing a very good job of managing Donald Trump. So she's not really free to kind of stake out her own international ideas or her own ideas about Mexico's place in the world. She's got to be reactive to the 800-pound gorilla on her border. And it's the same for everybody else, even countries that don't necessarily share a border with the United States or with a state capitalist China are functioning in a system where, if you want finance, if you want investment, you have to buy into a global financial system that has saddled this part of the world with an extraordinary amount of debt to the point where, countries are barely able to make their interest payments, let alone think about what else could we be doing with our, resources, with our money. You look at a country like the DRC that should be rolling in wealth at this point, should have plenty of money to do anything at once, and it's being picked apart by its neighbors, fueled by Western interests that want cheap access to pilfered minerals. It's just very difficult to imagine a movement actually getting traction, given all of the ways in which the system has been set up to exploit those countries, to exploit the people in those countries and leave them basically at a subsistence level, scrambling to just keep up. And you joke about the climate Possadism, but like to me, it feels like it's going to take something like that to break the stranglehold that the United States and to a large extent, I mean, the EU. You could talk about any of them. It's not just the U.S., but that those countries have on the way things get done globally to somehow break that system, maybe to refocus things regionally. I mean, I think there's reason there could be reason to hope that there's a lot of regional economic blocks in Africa that could be made to work in a different way, but they're stuck again. They're stuck in the same system. I mean, they're stuck operating in the same parameters that everybody else is. It's just hard for me to imagine that. And maybe I'm just not. Maybe I'm too pessimistic, or I'm lacking the imagination here. But I just don't. I don't know. I don't see it.
So then, do you think that basically once it didn't happen in the industrialized centers of the global north, it being a transition to an even managed social democratic capitalism, let's leave out full on communism, that in retrospect that the battle was effectively, or rather the war was lost. Obviously no one could have known that at the time, but just to repeat the argument that I made on the Hinge Points podcast with Matt, is that once the working classes of Europe fought each other in World War One, instead of uniting in a cross-border form of class solidarity, it does seem difficult to imagine the type of transition to communism happening in the North Atlantic world. And then you have the history of the 20th century, which is that the two largest and most powerful communist states, the Soviet Union and the People's Republic of China, one collapsed and the other, I think it's very difficult to call it communist. I mean, maybe Xi Jinping is planning to use the tools of capitalism to foster a revolutionary transformation to communism. But it seems to me, much like the Soviet Union did during World War II, China focuses much more on a nationalist politics, which, fair enough, I understand why that is in the actually existing world. So, do you think there was ever hope? Do you think that the war could have been won? Or is the victory of capitalism in hindsight, which is of course 2020, something that was genuinely overdetermined, something that was very difficult to push in a different direction?
I mean, if you couldn't get the working classes of Europe relatively homogenous, right? I mean, yeah, okay, you got France, Germany, you've got everybody's got their little fiefdom, but relatively homogenous. If you couldn't get those working classes to all realize that they've got commonalities of interest, that they should be pulling in the same direction, and how much more difficult is it going to be to get the working classes of incredibly diverse global South regions to see past the national interest, or to see past whatever their government's telling them, and to work together? It just seems uh, impossible to me. I mean, not impossible, but really difficult to imagine having more success in those regions. And then to add on to that the structures of colonialism that were already in place in 1914, that buried any kind of hope for the peoples of these countries or these parts of the world to determine their own course, their own political direction, their own economic direction. Like it's just a mountain of shit basically that was in the way, and I don't think uh, I really don't feel like that's been cleared away to the point where you could see genuine solidarity, genuine communist sentiment developing across nations. It just, everything's been parceled out, divided up, usually as a legacy of colonialism, not always. But, couple the legacy, couple that with against the stuff I was talking about earlier, the idea that you're still trying to function in a global economic system that's rigged against anything like this. It's rigged against any sort of even social democracy at this point, it feels like, let alone socialism or communism. It's a lot. It's a lot. That's all I can say.
It's certainly a lot. I want to talk about something maybe a little bit orthogonal, but I think people want us to talk about it. Is what do you see Trump doing? What do you see the Trump project being? Clearly, Trump 2.0 is far more radical than Trump 1.0. And it's an interesting historical question to explore why. The degree to which he personally developed, the degree to which his politics has reshaped the Republican Party, now that there's more loyalists who actually know how to manipulate the system. Maybe he is someone who has spent the last 4 years thinking about what he did wrong and is just going in a whole hog, the strategy of the executive orders, and it looks like ignoring judicial orders is something that a president in which power has centralized is able to do. But what do you think um, is going on if you're trying to analyze what Trump is doing? To me, it's a form of basically an extreme authoritarian use of a presidency that is by definition a quite authoritarian office, and has become more and more authoritarian over the course of the 20th and 21st centuries. The slow accretion of centralized power in the executive branch, which is why I thought if Bernie had a hope, he would have had to do something like this, or really like similar to FDR, who just said, I'm going to use this office and you're going to see what happens with it. But you've talked about this less than I have, both on the podcast and in public. So I'm just curious, what do you think Trump is actually doing here?
Well, it does feel like, I mean, the end goal here is not so much, we want to have different trade relationship. We want to have, more exploitative relationship with Europe, or with, we want to pivot to China. Like all of the foreign affairs stuff seems tangential. What the project is here is turning, like going that last step and making the presidency an elected monarchy that's accountable to nothing. I think the big hurdle that people before Trump have been unwilling to challenge in just normal kind of everyday parlance, leaving aside times of perceived crisis like the Great Depression or the Civil War, has been the judiciary, like the willingness to say, uh, I don't care what the courts say. I'm going to do what I want. Like I'm above the courts. And they've actually made this argument quite openly, especially in the last few days with the deportation stuff, sending these alleged Tren de Aragua gang members who we don't even know if they're gang members because they haven't had any fucking due process. We just sent them to the prison camp in El Salvador to do prison labor. And the court openly defying a court order, and the argument, they've tried a little bit to say, well, the planes were already in the air, there was nothing we could do, and gosh, the ruling came too late. But also they've made the argument that a district judge can't stop the president from doing what the president wants to do, which is just, that's it. I mean, that's the end of the project. Like that's the final stage. The president has no check on his authority, and then the argument becomes, who is this judge or who is this person, whatever role they may have, to defy the will of the American people who elected this man. And if you take that argument to the logical endpoint, it's you get elected president and you're free to do whatever you want, period. Because the American people said, we like this guy, we want him to be president, or we like this woman, in the event that we ever get over our sexism and actually elect a female president. And that's it. That's the end of the story. Again, there's no Congress that can stand in your way. There's no judge that can stand in your way. It just, the project is they want an elected king. And once they get an elected king, then you can do all sorts of things to make sure that you never lose the White House again, or that elections become meaningless. But I think the immediate what the immediate project seems to be for Trump, for Elon, for all these guys, is creating or finishing the job of making this office just completely paramount without any sort of check or balance.
Yeah, and to me, the big unique shift in Trump is the fact that it's happening during times of nominal peace. I mean, if you go back to the
Right,
Civil War, you have
right.
Lincoln suspending habeas corpus. If you go back to World War One, you have the arrest of Eugene Debs. You have the arrest of other anti-war not protesters or even just critics. You have the deportation of anti-war critics and ethnic minorities. During World War II, you have the incarceration of thousands upon thousands of innocent Japanese citizens. But all of those have been taken under the rubric of a declared war. And so I think that is really the big shift in what's happening with Trump right now, which is interesting because the United States has basically just been in a constant state of war since World War II. It's always been at war. So it seems to me an evolution of that trend, whereas like since we're never going to declare a war, it's now
Right.
always a war, and so the president basically has the authority to do what they want. And at this point, I'm curious if Trump continues to defy judicial orders, if that's going to have any consequence. It seems like the Democratic Party, at least at the moment of recording, isn't going to be able to do something. But I'm curious if there's going to be any other buck that's going to get between Trump and his decisions.
Right. And I think it's instructive, again, to just look at what's happened over the last couple of days. The invocation of the Alien Enemies Act, the 1979 or 1798, rather, Alien Enemies Act, to deport these people to El Salvador, which requires there to be a war, which we don't do anymore. We don't declare war. So that's out. But it also gives the president the latitude to invoke the act in case of invasion or what it calls predatory incursion. And the argument here is that, like, the 238 maybe gang members, again, we don't know because there was no due process afforded these people, but the 238 maybe gang members that we deported to El Salvador to sit in Bukele's prison for a year constitute a predatory incursion or an invasion from, I guess, the government of Venezuela, because it does say it has to be from a foreign nation or government. And it's just all bullshit. Like, it's all obviously bullshit. It's like going through the motions. You know, everybody knows it's bullshit. He just wants to be able to deport people without any check. And I do think it's like we've gone from times when, you know, presidents would assert extraordinary powers when there was an obvious crisis to like manufacturing an excuse for presidents to exert wider authority. The war on terror could be argued
The
was, you
Gulf
know,
of
was
Tonkin.
something like that. The Gulf of Tonkin, sure, but we're at the point now. We're on the precipice of just saying this is how things are, and
Yep.
you know, we're not quite there yet because again, we are trying to say that a couple hundred alleged gang members is enough to trigger this legal justification. But the next step after that, after that absurdity, is to just say, who cares? Like, we don't need to bother with this, you know, these niceties. We're just going to do what we want, and nobody's going to stop us, and nobody is going to stop. You know, the Democrats aren't equipped for this. They weren't equipped in 2008 when, you know, Mitch McConnell said my job is to make Barack Obama a one-term president and I'm just going to say no to everything. They had no idea how to respond to that even. So, you know, we're at a much more serious point where the whole thing is just being the whole facade of the Constitution and the rules and the norms is being shown to be basically only as good as anybody's willingness to enforce them, and it's all basically a handshake agreement. And if one side just says, "Nah, I'm not going to bother with this shit," there's nothing there. Like, it just all the edifice just collapses.
Yeah, and I mean, this is something that I have long thought is a potential within the American system. It's such an authoritarian office that really so much of the restriction on presidential power has been norms based, that it was always a risk and basically always to declare at every moment being a state of exception. Um, this is the natural outcome, to take a more proximate cause, of the Bush 2 argument. The theory of the unitary executive, which was proffered throughout the war on terror to basically give both first Bush and then later Obama incredible authority to do things like kill American citizens without due process. This is where it leads to, and people on the left have been warning about this for a long time, and it's tragic and grim that we've arrived here. But Derek, do you have any other thoughts, or should we leave it there?
I think tragic and grim is a good place to leave it, because
That should
that's
be
what
the
it is.
new name of our podcast. Well, everyone, thank you very much for listening. And as always, keep on rocking in the free world. Bye.
Bye.